try them. So if I cry, it's just the lenses. Well, let me call today's commission meeting to order. It's the March 2013 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. We have a special guest this morning, but before, very quickly, Madam Secretary, if I could ask you to introduce our agenda for today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes one presentation and one item for your consideration. First, you will hear a presentation on the Commission's work with tribal nations and Native communities in 2012, highlighting regulatory and tribal consultation efforts and providing examples of projects expanding the reach of voice, broadband, and radio broadcast services. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to improve the reliability of 911 service nationwide based on the recommendations contained in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau's January 2013 report on the impact of the derecho storm. This is your agenda for today. The first item on today's agenda will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Office of Native Affairs and Policy.
Well, before I turn it off to CGB and ONAP Director Jeff Blackwell, let me welcome the many tribal representatives who are here today. We appreciate that you've come here to participate in this meeting. And let me welcome a very special guest. He didn't travel that far today, although anytime a member of our oversight body comes to pay a visit to us, it's a big deal. It honors the Commission. And I'm particularly pleased today that we have here a great supporter of the Commission and, more importantly, of Indian Country, New Mexico Senator Tom Udall. Now, Senator Udall has always been a strong champion of tribal communities, working hand-in-hand with tribal governments, as knowledgeable as anyone out there about the challenges of tribal issues and the opportunities that communications provides. Senator Udall currently serves on the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. He was vice chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus when he was in the House. I will tell you that very early on, after I was confirmed for this job, I met with Senator Udall, and he made it very clear that there were huge challenges and opportunities that needed to be addressed with respect to communications, access in tribal lands. That the Commission had a lot of work to do, and that he expected us to do it. It's no exaggeration to say that Senator Udall spurred us to action. His terrific staff has been an ongoing assistance in that, and that spur has been effective. Over the past 3 years at the FCC, working together and with our terrific staff, we've created a new tribal mobility fund for mobile access to people in tribal communities, developed tribal government engagement requirements for our Universal Service Fund program, and established a tribal priority in full-power FM radio, which led to the first full-power tribal commercial FM allotments, one of which was assigned to the Navajo Technical College in Crown Point, New Mexico. These are important actions on their own. They flowed from a more fundamental decision that we made early on, which was that the FCC needed to alter its structure and organization when it came to thinking about tribal issues. And 4 years ago when we reviewed this, the truth is there was a lot of goodwill at the Commission, but no person or office responsible every day to be thinking about what can the Commission do today to advance the opportunities of communications technology for tribal communities. Well, one of the very first things we did was create the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, and brought on just a great leader in Jeff Blackwell to lead it. That, I think, in some ways is an even more important action than the concrete ones that I've mentioned, as important as they are, because institutionally, over time, it'll lead to more and more activity and action and positive results for tribal communities around the country. Senator Udall is certainly one of the main reasons that ONAP exists, this office, and I'm honored, Senator Udall, that you're here today as we review the work the Commission has been able to do since ONAP's founding Let me thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your years of leadership and forward thinking in this area. I'd like to invite Senator Udall to address the Commission and the public audience today. Please, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that very generous and very nice introduction. And let me just say to you, I think in our years of knowing each other, you've been a great listener, and I think really a great advocate for the tribes across the country. And I especially want to thank Commissioner McDowell and all of the commissioners for your commitment to working with tribes on a government-to-government basis, and in particular on this crucial issue of the digital divide in Indian country. You mentioned it in your opening remarks. This is an issue that I've worked with each of you, I think, and talked to each of you about as commissioners, and I also worked with Commissioner ROSENWORCEL on this on the Commerce Committee, and my able staffer Kevin Cummins is here. He has not forgotten about the Commerce Committee. I want you to know that. And even though I'm not on the Commerce Committee anymore, he's staying actively involved. So today, as we debate the role of government and the federal budget, many Commission employees may feel, and I know there are many of you here today, that public service is diminished. So I want to remind the FCC staff that their work is important, and that their work does matter to lots of people, often people that they may never meet, that are out there in the far reaches of the country, whether on an Indian reservation or in a far-off rural community. This is especially true in tackling the digital divide facing Native American and Native Hawaiian communities. There are estimated to be more than 320 million wireless phones in the U.S. That's more cell phones than people. It reminds me a little bit, I have a county in New Mexico that has 2,000 people, and it has 20,000 cows. And so I sometimes I feel, because they're such a good supporter of mine, I wish the cows could vote. But most of us, and especially young people, probably cannot imagine life without a phone. I mean, as I was coming over here today and in your building, I was running into people with phones right near to them all the time. Yet more than 30% of the households in Indian country still do not have access to basic landline or wireless phone service. For members of the Navajo Nation in particular, the situation is even worse. Fixed broadband deployment on tribal lands may be as low as 10%. A very, very troublesome figure there. And statistics do not convey the hardships this digital divide creates. Not having a landline or a cell phone reception can mean the difference between life and death. Imagine not being able to call an ambulance when you or your loved one is in medical danger. Several years ago, I had a man outside of Gallup, New Mexico, which is Gallup's on the edge of one of the largest reservation in the country. And this man called me and told me about a circumstance where he missed 2 opportunities for a life-saving kidney transplant because he was unable to communicate, because he lacked telephone service at home, and he could not be contacted in time. It was an urgency of time issue. And Native American communities are among the least connected, and this is where broadband technology can help the most by overcoming physical distances, by overcoming geographic isolation. Broadband can help improve economic development, education, and access to health care. Now, as former Commissioner Michael Copps, who I know many of you know very well and have spent time with, he often described it, and he had a wonderful, short, pithy quote. He said, "Access denied is opportunity denied." So thankfully, this commission has taken important steps on a bipartisan basis, and I would congratulate all of you on that, on a bipartisan basis to address this problem. The new Office of Native American Affairs and Policy, led by Jeff Blackwell, is working to improve access to communication services throughout tribal lands. It has also helped increase engagement with tribes on a government-to-government basis. Recent FCC orders have considered the unique communication challenges facing Native Americans and Native Hawaiian communities. The new Tribal Mobility Fund, for example, will promote wireless deployment where it is sorely needed on tribal lands, and FM radio allotments to tribal governments can further promote cultural heritage and preserve unique languages in Native American communities. I applaud these efforts. I'm confident they will make a difference. This will help Native American communities harness new communications technologies to improve economic development and to increase opportunities for education and for health care. But of course, still more, and Jeff, you know this well, but of course, still more needs to be done. So in thanking Chairman GENACHOWSKI and this commission for all your hard work, I want to conclude by urging you to build on these really solid efforts that you have put in place. We must ensure that our nation's tribal lands are not bypassed as broadband networks are built out across the country. There are 566 federally recognized tribes and 231 federally recognized Native Alaskan entities, and approximately 38,000 beneficiaries of Hawaiian homelands held in trust. We're talking about an extensive area and very diverse populations. Reaching these communities will take continued commitment and resources. But the Commission's task of making communication services available to all people, and I underline that, and all people of the United States must include Native Americans as our country's first peoples. I look forward very much to continuing the work with all of you on this very important issue. And let me just say, as a new member, I gave up the Commerce Committee to get on the Appropriations Committee, and in my new role, I will also do my very best to make sure that you have the resources that you need to meet these important challenges that you face. And let me just thank you again for your dedication, for your hard work and your service. I wish I could stay and hear the report. I don't wish to stay to get grilled by you. You know, we normally, as you know, we play that role up on the hill. So I have a markup today in front of the Environment and Public Works Committee. It started right at 10, and so they said you could be a little bit late, but not too much. So thank you again, just really in a very sincere way for the work that you do and for the work that this important office has done, and continue to build on it, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Udall. You honor us with your presence here today, and your partnership will be important as we continue to address these issues. Let's turn now to a report. Mr. Blackwell, the floor is yours.
Actually, we'd like to begin with our Acting Bureau Chief, Chris Monteith.
Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This morning, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Office of Native Affairs and Policy is pleased to present its 2012 annual report. This report and today's presentation will describe the Commission's work with tribal nations and Native communities since the creation of the office in 2010. We will highlight regulatory and tribal consultation efforts undertaken by those throughout the Commission and provide case studies illustrating the impact and potential of the Commission's regulatory agenda and tribal consultation efforts to expand the reach of voice, broadband, and radio broadcast services. Seated with me at the table are Jeff Blackwell, ONAP's Chief, Irene Flannery, Deputy Chief, Dan Rommel, Senior Policy Advisor, Lyle Ishida, Policy Advisor, and Rod Flowers, Office Coordinator. Bo Finley, ONAP's Legal Advisor, is guiding in the booth this presentation. Thank you so much. Jeff?
Thank you.
So we'd like to begin the presentation. Jukma, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Heshje, and good morning. It is a good day that the new spring season brings. On behalf of the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, thank you for the opportunity to provide this report and present it at this open meeting. Since the earliest days of the FCC's fieldwork with tribal nations, the writing of our Commission's tribal policy statement, and our formulation of an initial regulatory agenda for tribal lands in 2000, I have been very fortunate to be involved. From my duties within this building at that time and now, and while working on behalf of tribal nations while away from the FCC, I have been able to take part in every single consultation and training event that the Commission has hosted since they began in 2000. I wish to humbly say that, without a doubt, these days are definitely a series of high watermarks in an ever-rising current of the Commission's work with tribal nations. With the steadfast focus of this Commission and our entire agency, the FCC's work today is found on the top of more tribal nations' governmental agendas than ever before. It is an honor to be involved in this work with you and with so many dedicated people throughout our agency on these important matters. ONAP's report will outline the forward momentum we have developed due to the Commission's ongoing commitment to consultation and coordination with tribal nations, the policies and regulatory agenda we have developed, and the progress we have made to date in delivering on the promises of our work in Indian country. Promise is not a word that we use lightly in federal Indian affairs. By promise, I mean the promise that the fruits of this Commission's work will result in a connected Native America and all the quality of life benefits that it will bring. Halfway through this presentation, Irene Flannery will present a series of case studies that report on the outcomes and potential outcomes of the Commission's work in Indian country. This section involves real faces and names with Indian country that are actually making a difference. It is widely known that by any measure, communications technologies on tribal lands lag far behind the nation as a whole. And as the National Broadband Plan states, how tribal lands have historically had less access than any other segment of the population. Our report will outline how we continue to learn just how complex and diverse the digital divide is in Indian country. In certain places, it is getting better. In others, it is getting worse, in that it is showing itself to be recalcitrant. Within individual reservations, the connectivity to certain districts or communities is improving, while in others it is not. Perhaps this is because of the presence of a highway or a core community institution. These aspects vary from tribe to tribe and region to region. The root causes of the barriers to market entry, such as remoteness, low population density, pervasive poverty, or historic geopolitical reasons, often have common themes. But they also have foundational issues that differ widely from tribal nation to tribal nation. However, viable solutions do not follow common themes. We have learned that important lesson time and time again in Indian country. Overcoming the obstacles requires creative and flexible approaches, where the only common theme to the solutions is that one size fits none in Indian country. Our report reflects that our work is informed by these complexities. ONAP's organic order provides that ONAP will be charged with bringing the benefits of a modern communications infrastructure to all Native communities by ensuring robust government-to-government tribal consultation, working with commissioners, bureaus, and offices, as well as other governmental agencies and private organizations to develop and implement policies for assisting Native communities, and ensuring that Native concerns and voices are considered in all relevant Commission proceedings and initiatives. Our mission can perhaps best be described as multiple efforts to bring the Commission to Indian country and to bring Indian country to the Commission. For this presentation, we've worked very hard to identify photos that illustrate our work. To be effective, ONAP works with sensitivity and the trust and understanding of an Indian country insider. We also endeavor daily to provide expertise and genuinely helpful policy input throughout the Commission in order to help transform the field and ensure your deliberations involve the perspective of tribal nations. ONAP is first and foremost a policy shop. In our busiest moments, we tend to see our job as working with everybody. We meet with tribes, states, carriers, associations, and virtually all involved who are interested in deployment on tribal lands. For while we are charged with developing and driving a commission-wide tribal agenda, we endeavor to be very inclusive in our work and see that every perspective is taken into account. In that regard, ONAP fills a multifaceted role for the Commission. We have coordinated on dozens of rulemakings, adjudications, and licensing matters. We have testified on Capitol Hill 4 times before 3 committees. On this particular slide, I would like to say a special thanks to Greg Geis and the ladies and gentlemen of the Office of Legislative Affairs for their guidance and assistance on these important Hill missions. In addition to Capitol Hill, we have represented the Commission in meetings at the White House on tribal broadband issues, and we coordinate with a number of other federal agencies on a broad range of federal priorities related to communications need in tribal nations. In our work in the field, where the digital divide is experienced daily, we estimate that our efforts to date have reached over 400 tribal nations, and we have personally set foot on 42 different Indian reservations, on Hawaiian homelands, and in Alaska Native villages. We have personally experienced the lack of connectivity and seen the needs with our own eyes. This uniquely informs the work of this Commission and the ability of tribal nations to be involved in the solutions to their communications needs. Regarding ONAP's goals for a successful 2012, as that is what our report reports on, ONAP's report relates in many places to 2 broad areas in which the Commission's new priorities in working with Indian country are found. The first is a renewed and reinvigorated tribal consultation, coordination, and training program. We work closely with the members of the FCC Native Nations Broadband Task Force in our field meetings, and we employed a new approach to the dynamic use of technology in our consultations and training classrooms. You'll hear more about each of these in a few moments. The other broad area of our goals are the Commission's ongoing efforts in a new and energized regulatory agenda. These include important aspects of the new Connect America Fund regulations and the Lifeline and Link-Up reform. The Connect America Fund's tribal government engagement obligation provides the basis for the identification of shared solutions and a reporting roadmap to the digital divide on a tribe-by-tribe, region-by-region basis. Given the pervasive poverty levels across tribal nations, Enhanced Lifeline is an absolutely necessary program in Indian country, and our reforms preserved link-up only on tribal lands throughout the nation. Lifeline is the only way many people on tribal lands can afford to keep a phone and stay in touch. With wireless services lacking robustness on so many tribal lands, a situation often representing a greater risk of life given the remote and harsh conditions, our Spectrum Over Tribal Lands proceeding continues to be a priority for tribal nations. With the Commission's tribal priority in radio broadcast licensing, a clear path has been opened for tribal nations to broadcast to their own communities. You'll hear more about this in a moment as well. We have been involved and expect more. We have been involved in many and expect more individual matters involving opportunities for tribal nations to self-provision their own solutions, such as eligible telecommunications carrier designations and experimental licenses. We also manage the growing potential opportunities found in the very diverse sections of the Commission's Omnibus Notice of Inquiry on Tribal Lands. Each of these areas saw an unprecedented amount of tribal involvement in 2012. Just as ONAP was created in response to a recommendation in the National Broadband Plan and the efforts that our chairman outlined earlier, so too was the FCC Native Nations Broadband Task Force. The task force consists of elected and appointed tribal leaders who are knowledgeable and interested in telecommunications policy, not just for the benefit of their own tribes, but for all of Indian country as well. These task force members come from across Indian country. The task force is also comprised of decision makers from across the Commission, and we've worked hard with the Native members of the task force in the development of our regulatory agenda. Views and policy input is presented from different tribal perspectives, but with common objectives, motivated by all too common challenges and impediments. Their help has been invaluable, and following today's meeting, we will be holding a conference call of the task force members to set out an agenda for the coming year. The potential of developing an FCC consultation policy through the task force will be part of the discussion. Mr. Chairman, I should point out that several task force members have joined us today for the meeting, and I want to introduce them. In the row behind me are Matthew Rantanen, IT Director of the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association and Tribal Digital Village, headquartered at the Paula Tribe in Southern California. Howard Brown, Interim Director of Tulalip Data Services for the Tulalip Tribes in Washington State, and Pearl Mikulski of Coerac Incorporated, who has come all the way from Nome, Alaska, to be with us today. In our 2012 on-the-ground, Get Our Boots Muddy efforts in their respective regions, each of these three task force members was simply instrumental. Matt, Howard, Pearl, thank you for being here. In our fieldwork efforts to engage with tribal nations in consultation and training endeavors, we experienced a wonderful level of helpful coordination and involvement from across the Commission. One aspect of this work in particular we wish to highlight here and is touched upon in various places in the report. We have coordinated with the Office of Managing Director and their Office of the CIO to develop new tools to involve tribal nations in our dockets and consult with and train tribal nations in the field. We employ the use of advanced smart devices in our meetings with tribal nations and off-the-shelf hardware and software, such as speech-to-text, to develop meeting records and assist in the involvement of tribal nations who wish to infuse themselves in the government-to-government dialogue. Another particularly noteworthy aspect of this field test plan we have is the Native Nations Learning Lab, a mobile, scalable classroom comprised of low-cost workstations, routers, and printers. Attendees to our regional broadband and telecom 101 consultation and training events can schedule an individual session or attend classes on specific aspects of the Commission's work, such as how to access the Commission's databases, use the electronic comment filing system, use a channel locator, find and fill out a form, and find the public information on infrastructure and licensing. You can see on this slide Dorothy Stiffelmeyer of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and Lisa Scanlon of the Media Bureau engage with tribal representatives in just such efforts. A unique level of tribal consultation ensues. I would also add that the connectivity know-how and can-do attitude of Doc Williams of OMD helped everyone on our efforts in the field. Now I would like to turn it over to Irene Flannery. But before I would like to try to see if we've been joined by a particular tribal leader from Washington State and the Colville tribes. He's testifying on the Hill this morning and will be joining us a little later. But at that time, I would like to add my welcome. So for the next portion of the report, I'd like to turn to Irene Flannery for a presentation of the case studies. Thank you.
Good morning. The 6 case studies in the report tied together all of the preceding sections of the report by illustrating the real-world impact and potential impact of the Commission's policies and proposals in Indian country and in Native communities. We selected certain tribal nation policy issues and highlighted their impact in Indian country to make the words on the pages of the report come to life. The first case study involves our enhanced consultation and training efforts in 2012. In 2012, ONEP initiated a new tribal consultation and training program developed to be more responsive to the needs and requests of Indian country. This approach was characterized by a number of things, including, first, a boots-in-the-ground or regional and interactive approach. The most popular panel at each training event was the Tribal Leaders Panel, in which tribal leaders, representatives, and IT or telecom managers candidly shared their experiences with communications challenges they encountered and how they identified or developed solutions to address them. Second, as Jeff mentioned, we introduced the use of a native learning lab, or what we like to call an internet cafe on steroids. Third, what was critically important was the involvement of experts from across the Commission, including our colleagues from the Media Bureau, the Wireline Competition Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the Office of Managing Director. And finally, the critical and invaluable assistance of our FCC Native Nations Broadband Task Force members was so important in helping us to organize each of our training sessions in tribal lands. We held 6 tribal broadband and telecom 101 events in 2012. in Washington State, Southern California, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and 2 locations in Alaska. Our second case study involves universal service, and we highlight the Hopi tribe. The accomplishments of the Hopi tribe and Hopi Telecom Incorporated, a tribally owned ETC, goes to the very heart of universal service. Designated by the Commission as an ETC in 2007, Hopi Telecommunications, Inc. has used USF funds to deploy, maintain, and upgrade the infrastructure that the tribe purchased from the previous provider. While tribal residents once lacked basic telephone service, Hopi Telecommunications, Inc. now offers DSL, satellite, and enhanced phone service, and has the goal of providing broadband to all residents of the reservation. Hopi Telecommunications, Inc. also illustrates the critical importance of tribal lands, lifeline, and link-up on a reservation that faces an unemployment rate exceeding 50%. Hopi Telecommunications Incorporated was one of only 14 successful applicants and one of only two tribally owned successful applicants for the Lifeline Broadband Adoption Pilot Program. And I would be remiss not to mention another respected and valued tribally owned communications provider on the Hopi Reservation, KUYI 88.1 FM, Hopi Radio. Our next case study involves self-provisioning and the need for spectrum and highlights the Tribal Digital Village. In 2001, the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association began developing the Tribal Digital Village, a wireless broadband network using a microwave backbone to connect 17 member tribes in San Diego and Riverside counties, California. Because of the rocky, undeveloped, and mountainous terrain, many of these 17 reservations did not have access to terrestrial broadband services before the Tribal Digital Village. The Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association built 21 backbone and relay sites, each supporting solar-powered antennas, transmitting signal hops up to 26 miles apart, across a network that now extends over 450 miles. While the Tribal Digital Village was originally designed to connect tribal anchor institutions, FCC Native Nations Broadband Task Force member Matthew Rantanen, who was introduced a few minutes ago, who was the IT director of the Pala Reservation and the director of technology for the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, helped develop a wireless solution based on new white spaces spectrum technology for delivering broadband to residential and other resident-related facilities on the reservation. The need for access to more robust licensed spectrum is burgeoning in Indian country, spurred on by need and the potential of support in the form of the upcoming Tribal Mobility Fund reverse auction and future Mobility Fund Phase 2 support. Our next case study focuses on tribal engagement and the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. We selected the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation as our case study for tribal engagement because of the tribe's experience in trying to bring connectivity to their reservation. ONEP staff has consulted with tribal leaders and managers over the years and continues to witness challenges faced by the tribe, such as unconnected dark fiber on the reservation, installed without the knowledge or permission of the tribe. The new tribal government engagement obligation under the Connect America Fund rules provides new opportunities for tribal governments and the ETCs who provide service on their lands to work together and provide a foundation for future shared visions and solutions regarding the provision of communication services on tribal lands. Interest in the tribal government engagement obligation is strong in Native America. ONEP has been and will continue to work closely with tribal governments and ETCs alike, providing guidance when requested and going forward, helping to facilitate engagement sessions between tribal governments and ETCs. Our next case study focuses on radio broadcasting and the tribal priority and focuses on the Hualapai tribe. The Hualapai Indian Reservation sits on the southern side of the Grand Canyon. The population is sparse and the location is isolated outside of Peach Springs, which is the reservation's largest town. Currently, there is no broadcast radio service across much of the reservation. But the Hualapai tribe has important economic and community development plans and saw the tremendous promise and opportunity of owning a radio station and broadcasting to the reservation. The tribal priority afforded just such an opportunity. On October 11, 2012, the Hualapai tribe became the first tribal nation and second entity overall to petition for a full-power commercial FM radio license using the tribal priority. And on March 1, 2013, the Media Bureau's audio division granted Hualapai's petition for rulemaking and allotted FM channel 265A at Peach Springs, Arizona, as a tribal allotment. As the chairman noted earlier, at the same time, the audio division added channel 297A at Crown Point, New Mexico, as a tribal allotment in response to a petition followed by Navajo Technical College. Tribal government officials anticipate that a full-power commercial FM radio broadcast facility will allow the tribe to follow in the path of providing uniquely tailored cultural programming to tribal members, including preservation of native language, as well as providing broadcast radio service where none exists today and satisfying important public safety needs. Our final case study focuses on eligible telecommunications carriers and the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. For nearly 20 years, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe has endeavored to solve its communications problems. Straddling the borders of North Dakota and South Dakota, the sparsely populated Standing Rock Reservation experiences an unemployment rate exceeding 70%. That's 70. Unable to attract deployment, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe created Standing Rock Telecommunications Incorporated, a tribally owned and operated CMRS provider, to address the lack of service on the reservation. In a two-part decision in 2011, this commission designated Standing Rock Telecom as an ETC throughout the reservation, forging the path for a couple of firsts. Standing Rock Telecom is the first tribally owned wireless ETC. And Standing Rock Telecom was the first tribally owned ETC to be designated to serve entirely within the exterior boundaries of its reservation, recognizing the population of the reservation as the tribe's community and obviating the need for redefinition of the underlying rural telephone company study areas. In these efforts, Standing Rock was and continues to be a leader in the Commission's process for designating tribally owned wireless ETCs. As a result of ETC designation, Standing Rock Telecom was able to access critically needed USF support to build and sustain connectivity within the reservation. In addition, in October of 2012, Standing Rock was the first tribally owned ETC to be offered mobility fund support via reverse auction. Standing Rock Telecom's successful bid resulted in $3.3 million in total assigned support and coverage for up to 1,290 road miles on the Standing Rock Reservation. Thank you.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to say a special welcome to a senior tribal leader who has joined us this morning, whose timing has always been impeccable. John Cyrus of the Confederated Colville Tribes. He is chairman of the Colville Business Council, and as such is the senior-most elected official of his tribal nation. He comes from the Omak district of the Colville and represents a tribal nation that has citizens of many different indigenous peoples, including Nez Perce people, who are descended from the famous Chief Joseph. He has worked to protect the languages of his peoples and their sacred places, and he now oversees their entire government, which is a big responsibility. It's a special honor for me personally to see you here today, John, for two reasons. First, as you know, your tribal nation is a case study of our report. And secondly, because you have been a friend since college. Since we enrolled as freshmen together, endured so many classes, and played so many basketball games as teenagers, I think perhaps both of our hair was much longer, but maybe only I was much thinner. Heshche, Chukma, Chairman Cyrus, Mado, and thank you for coming this morning. With that, I would like to turn to our 2013 priorities, which, as you will see, figure prominently up front in our report of our 2012 activities. Here you see our 2013 tribal consultation and coordination priorities, and from our presentation, you can see why so many of these are here. I want to emphasize a point at the top of this slide. In the next few days, we will be releasing a public notice for Tribal Mobility Fund 1, Phase 1, which will kick off the process of awarding up to $50 million in one-time support to deploy mobile voice and broadband services to tribal lands that are currently unserved, and set a date for the auction, the reverse auction, in this fall. I'm excited that the Commission is taking this step in supporting tribal communities and maximizing the expansion of advanced mobile services. Throughout 2013, we will continue to work with Indian Country and our colleagues across the Commission on ETC petitions, the analysis of the first year of the Tribal Engagement Obligation, the Spectrum over Tribal Lands Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and the opportunities that the Tribal Priority in Radio Broadcasting presents. One new priority this year, which is emphasized here, and arose last November, is a request by the tower industry to the Commission's NEPA team, on which we participate with the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the Media Bureau, the Public Safety and Homeland Bureau, and the Office of the General Counsel, to consider how we would approach the possibility of authorizing non-compliant towers already constructed, and done so without environmental or historic cultural preservation review. We've also been asked by several other federal agencies how they might be able to utilize the Commission's tower construction notification system for their cultural preservation reviews. We have begun, in coordination with the NEPA team, we've already begun the dialogue with associations of tribal nations to learn and be informed by their values as we develop our own values for these purposes. With that, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I'd like to turn to slides that have the names of so many across the Commission. First, the slides involving our FCC Native Nations Broadband Task Force members, both elected tribal leaders and appointed tribal leaders from across Indian Country, and senior Commission staff members. Together, we all comprise the Native Nations Broadband Task Force. We'd also like to thank and acknowledge so many throughout the bureaus who have made our work possible. With that, Mado, thank you.
Thank you very much to each of you for an excellent, thorough presentation for your work. Let's proceed to comments from the bench. Commissioner McDowell.
Well, Chief Jeff, you do have that title, by the way. So thank you, and Irene and the whole team and everyone you mentioned in that slide, and many more. That was a very informative review of ONAP's 2012 annual report. Your diligence in ensuring that the voices of Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians are heard in every corner of this building and beyond is greatly appreciated. I'm also pleased that Senator Udall was able to speak for us today. His interest in expanding communication services on tribal lands has really been quite commendable. Finally, I thank the honorable tribal and Alaska Native representatives who are joining us today. Your ideas are incredibly valuable, and I hope that you have found the Commission to be helpful to you over the years. One of the first photographs you showed in today's presentation caught my eye, and it was a picture of an Alaska Native village. That picture reminds me of my very first trip as a commissioner. I traveled to Alaska in August of 2006, specifically to visit lands of Alaska Natives and learn about their unique challenges. And on that trip, I actually traveled to Nome, among other places. Subsequently, I visited several other Native lands throughout the United States. The picture also reminds me of the Commission's efforts in 2008 to control spiking costs and impose a spending cap on competitive eligible telecommunications carrier access to high-cost universal service support. Although the purpose of the cap was to control the growth of the fund, which I supported overall, I found it very important to support a narrow exception to the cap for providers serving tribal lands throughout our nation, including Alaska and Hawaii, of course, where telephone service and broadband deployment rates have been extremely low compared to other areas of our nation. Years later, in 2011, as part of our historic comprehensive reform of the Universal Service High Cost Fund, the Commission established, as the Chairman noted earlier, a separate fund to encourage mobile services on tribal lands. I'm interested in learning more about how implementation of the Tribal Mobility Fund is progressing. In addition to addressing the unique circumstances of tribal lands as part of universal service reform, I was also pleased to support the Commission's efforts in the past couple of years to encourage radio service, as you outlined, served by American Indian tribes, Alaska Native villages, and tribal consortia. Separately, while at the Commission, I have routinely sought ways to remove unnecessary regulations, and in particular, I have noted the importance of identifying rules that are barriers to the expansion of communication services on tribal lands. Providers currently serving or seeking to serve these areas of the country face many unique challenges, including difficult terrain, extreme climates, and remoteness. The Commission should be finding ways to enable these providers' efforts rather than adding to their burdens. And there's much more work to be done in this area, and I hope that all stakeholders continue to find ways to work together in a productive manner. So thank you very much, and your efforts are truly noble.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jeff and Irene, for that illuminating report on how this Commission, through the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, is better addressing the critical needs of tribal nations and Native communities. And I join in welcoming those members of the communities today. I join my colleagues in acknowledging Senator Udall's great work on these issues, for it is through collaboration with our leaders in Congress that we can best affect change and improve outcomes for all. It has truly been an honor to work with him and his staff as we consider and implement policies designed to improve communication services for tribal nations and Native communities. I look forward to that ongoing engagement. ONAP's mission to engage in robust government-to-government consultation and assist the Commission in developing and implementing policies for bringing modern communications infrastructure and services to all tribal nations and Native communities is critical. And what is clear from this presentation is while ONAP's and the Commission's initial work has been extremely productive, we still have a long way to go. Tribal nations and Native communities have traditionally had significantly less access to communication services than the rest of the U.S. While we have taken very proactive steps to address these wide gaps, we must stay diligent and continue to implement those policies already adopted. We must also press forward in concluding those potentially beneficial proceedings. So I encourage your and ONAP's continual aid in this effort by helping us prioritize the work that the tribal nations and Native communities in your consultations have noted would best deliver to them those much-needed services. We should also all be pleased to hear of the opportunities that our USF and Lifeline reforms have afforded some tribes, offering better coverage and enhanced quality of service. The Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 1 will soon be underway, and ONAP's engagement with tribal nations and Native communities in preparation for this opportunity is critically important. I have great hope today that more tribal lands will receive 3G or better wireless service as a result, and I am heartened by the introduction of new radio stations serving Native nations and Native communities, tribal nations and Native communities. Hearing news, music, and commentary in one's native tongue is priceless, especially during times of natural disasters and when information for the community's citizens is needed for saving and improving lives. Last Friday, I spoke about the importance of the Commission's Lifeline program, which provides telecommunications access to approximately 15 million low-income households. For those families, this assistance means that they no longer have to choose between having a meal or having access to 911, job opportunities, and conversations with their loved ones. And for those residing on tribal lands, Lifeline offers assistance to approximately 690,000 families. So why do I mention that here today? Typically, these families live in very remote areas where a phone call bridges a gap of many miles, sometimes up to 50 miles or more, between their homes and villages. While it is very important for the Commission to continue to be diligent in the implementation of its lifeline reform to address waste, fraud, and abuse, we must never lose sight of our obligation to ensure that consumers who have followed the rules and are eligible for the service are not denied a dial tone. This is especially true for tribal nations and Native communities, which already face many other obstacles when it comes to communications. So again, thank you, Jeff and ONAP, for your presentation and for the delivery of your annual report. And while I'm still trying to picture you on a basketball court, I will say that I look forward to our ongoing collaboration on ways to best serve all tribal nations and Native communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking Senator Udall. I had the opportunity to work with him when I served on the staff of the Senate Commerce Committee, and he is a champion of the First Order when it comes to issues on tribal lands. I also want to note his staff, Kevin Cummins, who's sitting quietly in the corner and hoping nobody notices, but he is also a dynamo on these issues and somebody the community should be aware of all of the good work he does. Let me also welcome the members from tribal lands who are here today, including Chairman John Cyrus of the Colville Confederated Tribes. The Colville Tribes, you've come to the FCC, probably the right place. By any measure, communities on tribal lands historically have had less access to basic telecommunications services than communities in just about any other part of the country. But this deficit does not end with simple phone service. It has transcended telephony and has carried over into broadband. The result? Too many of our native lands are on the far side of a complex and recalcitrant digital divide. Bridging this divide cuts to the core of the Commission's universal service mission, but solutions are not easy. As today's report suggests, in Indian country, one size fits none. I've actually seen this firsthand. Some years ago, I ventured with the Office of Native Affairs and Policy's own Jeff Blackwell deep into Washoe territory when we visited the Reno Sparks Indian colony. As I recall, leaving the highway and heading into the tribal desert meant leaving behind just about any semblance of a wireless signal. Last year, I spent time in Inupiat villages near the Arctic Circle in Alaska. In communities separated from each other by thousands of roadless miles, access to broadband is a lifeline. Yet without middle-mile transport facilities, satellite hops can limit the speed of services essential for healthcare, education, economic development, and full participation in modern civic life. Again, the issues are complex, and the solutions are not easy. But you can count me as an optimist, because outreach is a start, because the Commission is engaged, because leadership in tribal communities are steadfast and committed, because our universal service policies, like the Tribal Mobility Fund, are poised to bring new focus to the persistent gaps in tribal deployment. Because in time, I believe that the hard economics of networks and the issues of scale that come with vast stretches of land with low population are incredibly ripe for new technological solutions. Moreover, I believe that by working together, we can speed that day, bridge this divide, and accomplish some really great things. So let me thank the Office of Native Affairs and Policy for this presentation and for the incredibly important work that you do.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It goes without saying that Native communities and cultures have an important place in the American story. Indeed, my own home state of Kansas is named after the Kansa, a tribe that once inhabited the wide, windswept plains of the Midwest. Cities from Ocala, Florida to Seattle, Washington owe their very names to the rich traditions of our Native peoples. Today, there are 566 federally recognized tribes across the country, representing 1.9 million members, too many of whom face substantial challenges in life. Communications services can help bring prosperity, health, and education to Native populations that have not always been afforded these opportunities. As we heard during the presentation, for example, radio stations serving the Hopi Reservation and hopefully soon the Hualapai tribe can provide local content that is not going to be replicated anywhere else. A broadband connection can promote telehealth among Native Americans in South Dakota who otherwise might not have access to the appropriate medical care. And as well, wireless network can help those who live in Alaska Native villages that are unreachable by road or by water stay in touch with one another. But to make these kinds of communication services more available to Indian country, we have to understand the full scope of the problem. That requires outreach, and that requires engagement. As we at the FCC undertake each of those tasks, we are very lucky to have the support of the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, or ONAP. As we've seen today, ONAP has served, and I'm quite confident will continue to serve in the days ahead as an important resource as we seek to bring the benefits of the 21st century digital economy to everyone within the United States. Particularly in light of the notice of proposed rulemaking on our agenda this morning, addressing 911 resiliency, I feel compelled to mention one other issue. We must not lose sight of the fact that tribal nations also need a robust public safety communication system. So I'm pleased that today marks the beginning of the inaugural Native American Emergency Services and Management Conference being held in New Orleans, and that this afternoon the conference will feature a panel on emergency communications and technology. I hope that the staff at ONAP will keep track of this discussion and report back to us if there are steps that the FCC needs to take to help ensure that reliable emergency communications are available across Indian country. In conclusion, I want to thank Senator Udall and Kevin Cummins for attending this morning, and I particularly want to thank the staff of ONAP, Jeff Blackwell, Irene Flannery, Lashida, Rod Flowers, Dan Rummelt, and I know I left out somebody. Bo Finley, yes, because he's not here. For all of your efforts to ensure that our Native communities continue to play an important role in the dialogue here at the FCC. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, Commissioner Pai. And let me thank each of my colleagues for a series of excellent statements today. This is one of many areas where the Commission has worked together to see progress in areas of such importance. The lack of adequate communication services on tribal lands, traditional phone service, wireless, broadband, FM radio, is a serious problem. It's so desperately needed, and as you've heard from my colleagues, can do so much good by creating new opportunities for economic opportunity. Broadband can help small businesses in tribal areas get going. It can encourage young adults in these communities to stay. Telehealth, distance learning, they all can provide tremendous opportunities. None of this is news. But as I said at the start, one of the obstacles that we all agreed upon early on was that we needed to alter the structure of the Commission to not just talk about it, but to do things about it. And it's really thanks to the existence of ONAP, its terrific leadership and staff, that we've been able to make some progress. Let me thank Senator Udall for coming earlier today. Very much appreciate his remarks and his willingness to come here to the FCC. Kevin Cummings, thank you for staying throughout this proceedings, and we look forward to working with you to take what's been built so far and extend it for the benefit of members of tribal communities. Chairman Cyrus, thank you very much for being here today. The members of our Native Nations Broadband Task Force, which has played such an important role. Let me mention a few task force members. Matthew Rantanen of the Southern California Tribal Digital Village, Peel Mikulski of the Kurak in Nome, Alaska, and Howard Brown of the Tulalip tribes. Your work and the work of other people who are here today and who are not here today has been incredibly important. The Commission's relationship with tribal nations has grown stronger and stronger over the past few years. There was a meeting a little while ago between our ONAP and a group of tribal leaders and the executive director of the Jamestown Seclalem Tribe Economic Development Authority took a moment to write a letter afterwards, and after meeting with our team, she said, and I quote, "I came away believing, most importantly, that we have high-level, knowledgeable, and helpful friends at the FCC who are genuine and concerned about our success." And specifically, since the creation of the Office of Native Affairs and Policy in 2010 and the launch of a new policy agenda on Native Nations Day in 2011, we've established strong connections with Indian country that's helping ensure that tribal issues are a critical concern of every major proceeding. Because, of course, to make progress here, we not only need to think about concrete actions, programs, funds, exceptions targeted at tribal communities, we need to make sure that tribal communities have a seat at the table for our broader policy debates, discussion, so that the issues come up early, not later. This kind of cross-bureau, cross-office engagement has been very important and leads to successes and advances that people don't hear about, and that's fine because what matters is the result. Since the creation of ONAP, the Commission has touched over 400 tribal nations. ONAP has met directly with leaders of hundreds of tribal nations and visited 42 reservations. Each of the members of this Commission has visited reservations and tribal lands all over the place, from the native village of Noatak, 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle, accessible only by air, the Micmac and Maliseet lands in northernmost Maine, and Karuk, Hupa, and Yurok lands on the Klamath River in northern California. We've held 6 regional consultation and training seminars in 2012, 3 times more than in any prior year, with 4 of them in places where we had never done outreach. These training sessions were attended by representatives of over 120 tribes. We heard from tribes across the country that these sessions were real progress over what they'd seen before, and I don't mean that to be critical of what happened before, but simply to say that when we have focused leadership on these areas, we'll see the kind of increased engagement and progress that we've seen. Jeff, you and Chris and Irene, you've mentioned a number of specific steps taken over the last year. My colleagues have mentioned them as well. Let me just mention 2 here. One, building on the success of the Broad Mobility Fund, which we adopted last year, the first ever use of a reverse auction methodology for universal support, I'm pleased to announce that the Commission is moving ahead with our second USF reverse auction, which will dedicate $50 million to expanding mobile service on tribal lands. I also want, as others have, to acknowledge the important work that's being done to bring the first full-power commercial FM stations to tribal communities, one in New Mexico and one for the Hualapi tribe in Peach Springs, Arizona. I agree with my colleagues on the importance of local content, in particular to tribal communities, and these are, for that reason, things to celebrate. Now, a theme running through all of our work is the involvement of tribal nations in developing the solutions that will really work. One of the things we've seen in the past is, ideas that sounded good in Washington that were imposed and then ended up having disappointing results. And so we've been working very hard, thanks to our team, in developing solutions that bring together the ground-level, day-to-day experience of our tribal leaders and community with the expertise that we have at the Commission. This will continue. It's working. It's so important. In addition to Senator Udall, I want to thank, without naming them because there are so many, the many other members of Congress who have been partners in this important work. And I do want to acknowledge, I'm glad you put up the slide, Jeff, with all the people inside and outside the Commission who rolled up their sleeves to help on this effort. The challenges are enormous. The opportunities are even bigger. The work is not done. And we all look forward to continuing to work through ONAP and ourselves and the entire Commission staff with tribal nations to seize these opportunities for tribal communities. So thank you very much to all of you, and we look forward to your next report and a lot of work between now and then. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the next item?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. It is entitled, Improving 911 Reliability and Continuity of Communications Networks, Including Broadband Technologies.
Thank you all, and David, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. After an extensive inquiry and report on 911 outages during the June 2012 derecho, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau is pleased to present a notice of proposed rulemaking to improve the reliability and resiliency of 911 communications nationwide. Unlike a hurricane or superstorm predicted days in advance, this fast-moving windstorm arrived suddenly, testing the readiness of emergency communications from the Midwest to the Mid-Atlantic. In too many cases, 911 network service providers failed that test. The Bureau found that at least 77 911 call centers serving 3.6 million people in 6 states lost some degree of service. 17 of these call centers lost service completely, leaving more than 2 million people in 3 states unable to complete calls to 911 for several hours to more than a day. Because a 911 call can make the difference between life and death, particularly in a disaster like the derecho, these failures are unacceptable and call for action to ensure that the public can rely on 911 when it is needed most. The Bureau found that the derecho's destructive impact on 911 communications could have been prevented, or at least mitigated, if network service providers had followed key network reliability best practices developed in cooperation with industry. In most cases, we found that 911 service disruptions were attributable to avoidable planning and system failures in service providers' networks. Specifically, a lack of physical diversity in 911 and network monitoring circuits, and inadequate backup power in central offices. There are multiple published best practices that address these issues. If service providers had implemented them consistently, the widespread effects of the derecho on 911 communications could well have been different. The NPRM before you today provides the Commission with a flexible range of options to better ensure that 911 service providers follow vital best practices carefully in the future. It also promotes improved communication between network service providers and 911 call centers in the event of future outages. This item represents many months of hard work by Bureau staff, and we appreciate the supporting efforts of many people throughout the Commission. I would like to thank, in particular, our Chief Technologist and also the Office of General Counsel for their help with this item. Joining me at the table today are John Healy, Assistant Chief of the Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability Division, and Eric Schmidt, Attorney Advisor in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and Eric will present the item. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am pleased to present a notice of proposed rulemaking to improve the reliability and resiliency of 911 communications nationwide. This item addresses vulnerabilities revealed during the June 2012 derecho storm and other recent events that have raised concerns about the reliability of the nation's 911 infrastructure. This NPRM follows a comprehensive report by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau on the causes of widespread 911 outages during the derecho and how they can be prevented in the future. The NPRM seeks comment on how the Commission can ensure that 911 service providers follow key best practices in network design, maintenance, and operation. These practices have been developed through multi-stakeholder bodies such as the Communications, Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, or CSRIC, and there is no question that they are best practices based on sound engineering principles and broad industry consensus. The NPRM also supports the transition to next-generation 911 through questions about future network configurations, the range of entities subject to the proposals, and review and sunset of any approach that the Commission chooses to adopt. The NPRM seeks comment on how the Commission should implement 4 key recommendations identified in the derecho report. First, it seeks comment on how to ensure that 911 service providers periodically audit their networks for physical diversity. By this, we mean that critical 911 communications networks should have multiple physical paths between network nodes. This is a vital best practice that improves network reliability and resiliency by helping to identify and correct single points of failure in the network. During the derecho, single points of failure in carriers' networks in only a few critical central offices disrupted 911 communications to multiple jurisdictions. Regular diversity audits could have alerted service providers to these vulnerabilities and the need for additional redundancy in the network. Moreover, our analysis of information and trends before the derecho suggested that carriers may not have been physically auditing their 911 circuits adequately to satisfy the relevant CISRC best practice. In spite of the Bureau twice having issued public notices to encourage compliance with these best practices, in March 2010 and then in June 2012, shortly before the derecho, service providers appear to have either not complied or implemented these practices inadequately. Second, the NPRM seeks comment on ways to ensure that 911 service providers maintain adequate central office backup power, supported by appropriate maintenance, testing, and records retention. The derecho revealed how a battery or generator failure in a single central office can disrupt communications to an entire region. As the Bureau's report concluded, these failures could have been prevented through careful implementation of best practices in the design and maintenance of generators and other equipment. Third, the NPRM seeks comment on how to ensure that 911 service providers have physically diverse network monitoring and control links. Protecting visibility into their networks, even if one monitoring path fails. The ability to receive outage alarms and to monitor networks remotely is essential in an emergency because service providers cannot diagnose or repair problems if they are unaware that they exist. During the derecho, we found that multiple service providers had only one aggregation point to monitor numerous facilities across a wide geographic region, meaning that a single failure in that hub could cut off visibility into a large portion of their networks. Careful attention to physically diverse monitor links would have helped ensure that these service providers continued to receive accurate situational awareness, helping them to prioritize repairs and notify customers of outages. Finally, the NPRM proposes amendments to the Commission's existing rules on outage reporting to clarify and add specificity to service providers' obligations to notify 911 call centers of communications outages. Under the current rule, service providers must notify call centers as soon as possible with all available information that may be useful. During the derecho, however, multiple call centers receive vague or otherwise inadequate notification of outages affecting 911 service. We therefore propose to amend Commission Rule 4.9 to require service providers to notify call centers of outages by telephone and in writing via electronic means with specific information such as the nature of the outage, the estimated number and location of users affected, and the actions being taken by the service provider to address the outage. The revised rule also would require the sender of a 911 communications outage notification to provide a telephone number and email address at which it can be reached for follow-up. These changes will help provide 911 call centers with timely and actionable notification and minimize disruptions to emergency services. The NPRM seeks comment on a range of options to implement these recommendations. These approaches range from reporting and certification requirements, by which service providers could be required to disclose or certify to the Commission the extent to which they have implemented best practices, to mandatory reliability requirements for 911 networks, supported by inspections and compliance reviews. The item seeks comment on a preliminary cost-benefit analysis of these alternatives, and it also requests comment on any other approaches that the Commission should consider. As today's circuit-switched 911 network evolves into a next-generation system built on Internet protocol architecture, service providers and 911 call centers will realize many benefits in network reliability. By their nature, Internet protocol networks offer built-in advantages in diversity and redundancy that have the potential to mitigate some of the problems we observed last June. The NPRM seeks to support and encourage that transition while ensuring that today's 911 infrastructure is designed and maintained to high standards that meet the public's expectations for dependable service. As we learned in the derecho, these critical communications must be available at the times that they are needed most. The Bureau recommends adoption of the NPRM and requests editorial privileges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, important item. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the core missions of our government is to keep the American people safe and help them in times of crisis. Part of Congress's mandate to the Commission is to ensure that our nation's communications infrastructure remains functional during natural disasters and crises triggered by human actions. All too often, during a catastrophe, just as we need communication systems the most is when they have been disrupted, impaired, or simply overwhelmed. Today, we seek the American people's comments on options aimed to improve the reliability and resiliency of our nation's communications infrastructure. I don't necessarily agree with every idea in this notice, but I do think it is important for us to seek and gather the data and opinions of all interested stakeholders before going any further. By way of background, as was pointed out, the damage caused by last summer's so-called derecho storm in the mid-Atlantic region was simply overwhelming. This destructive windstorm came with little warning and left millions without electrical power, damaged communication systems, and knocked out 911 services. As this notice states, 77 public safety answering points, or PSAPs, serving more than 3.6 million people in 6 states, lost some degree of connectivity. Upwards of 2.5 million people in the greater Washington, D.C. area alone were without access to 911 services as a result of this powerful natural phenomenon. The FCC's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau's investigation concluded that many of these failures could have been prevented with 911 circuit auditing, reliable and functional backup power, monitoring systems, and the proper implementation of already crafted industry best practices. In the immediate wake of the derecho, Chairman JENACHOWSKI and I discussed the urgent need to investigate what went wrong and how the Commission could help prevent such tragedies in the future. The response from the Chairman, our fellow Commissioners, and the Bureaus was swift and thorough. All of them should be commended, as should many state and local public safety agencies, along with industry, for their efforts to learn the truth about what went wrong so we can prepare for tomorrow's emergency situations. I'm pleased that we seek information regarding the costs and benefits of the various options contained in this notice. The Commission has provided some rough cost estimates, and I hope that industry takes this opportunity to provide granular network-specific data regarding the projected costs of implementing the various proposals. I've long advocated performing bona fide cost-benefit analyses before adopting new rules, so I'm glad to see that we're doing that today. Similarly, I'm encouraged that we seek comment on our statutory authority to adopt regulations regarding the reliability of 911 communications networks, along with whether the Commission should review and sunset any requirements it may impose as an outcome of this notice. I do, however, have concerns that if the Commission decides to follow a path towards reliability requirements based on a set of standards or best practices, the Commission could unintentionally stifle technological innovation and 911 communications improvements. We must ensure that any FCC rules allow service providers the flexibility to manage and upgrade their network configurations, including those components that improve 911 communications reliability, such as backup power and monitoring systems. Furthermore, rules ordering the Commission to conduct compliance reviews, and site inspections of 911 service provider facilities to monitor compliance with industry standards or new Commission requirements could be unduly burdensome on the Commission's limited resources, and I'd love to hear more comment about that. I'd like to thank the Chairman and my colleagues for incorporating many suggested edits. Specifically, I'm pleased that this notice seeks data and information regarding 911 communications service providers' implementation of and experiences with industry best practices. A fact-driven analysis warrants a public record that contains nationwide data as opposed to information supplied by only a couple of providers regarding the effects of a specific storm on a particular area. I'm also pleased that the notice inquires about improvements implemented to increase reliability based on the lessons learned from the derecho, along with whether best practices should be revised and how they should be used going forward. Finally, I would like to thank the dedicated staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their efforts in collecting and analyzing information in the aftermath of the derecho, issuing the Bureau report, and preparing this notice. It was a lot of work in a relatively short period of time. I also know that you were busy organizing workshops and compiling data regarding what we can learn from the effects of Hurricane Sandy. I'm grateful for everything you do to ensure that Americans have access to emergency services when they are needed the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McDowell. Commissioner Clyburn.
This notice of proposed rulemaking on improving the reliability of 911 communications networks sends an important message about how seriously this Commission takes its statutory obligation to promote the safety of life and property through the use of wire and radio communication. Congress not only made public safety communications a fundamental purpose for creating this agency almost 80 years ago, it passed more recent laws in 1999 and 2008 that specifically direct us to ensure the availability of emergency 911 service throughout this nation. Consistent with these congressional directives, the Commission should take appropriate corrective action if it learns of any significant problem with 911 service. As we know, the June 2012 derecho not only caused several deaths and widespread property damage, it also impaired the ability of millions of Americans to access to 911 services and left certain areas without 911 for several days. It was therefore incumbent upon the Commission to swiftly and thoroughly investigate why these substantial service outages occurred and find ways to minimize the risk of them ever happening again. I commend Chairman JENACHOWSKI for making this investigation a top priority. Under the expert leadership of David Turetsky, the staff conducted a comprehensive inquiry. It reviewed more than 500 network service outage reports and interviewed those in 28 public safety answering point centers, numerous state and county officials, representatives of 8 communications providers, as well as battery and equipment manufacturers. The result of those investigations, unfortunately, are quite troubling. To promote network reliability, the Commission has traditionally used a regulatory light touch, preferring voluntary commitments to industry best practices. But this approach only works if communications providers are actually following these best practices. What the staff uncovered, however, was that with a number of communications providers, this was not the case. Service disruptions were found to be caused by communications providers failing to have adequate plans and systems in place in cases of storms and other inclement weather events, and the Bureau concluded that these failures could and would have been avoided if providers had followed those industry best practices and other sound engineering principles. This is unacceptable. So now it is appropriate and timely for the Commission to propose rules to ensure that communications companies are following well-established practices to promote reliability. At a minimum, these practices should include what our technical staff recommended in the derecho report. auditing the physical routes of 911 networks, ensuring physical diversity of monitor and control links, backup power at central offices, and giving PSAPs more information when service outages occur. This NPRM seeks comments on the best approach to implement these recommendations and offer 4 other possible methods, including reporting, certification, or compliance review requirements. Whichever approach we ultimately adopt, we must be certain that our licensees are meeting their obligations to allow consumers to reach 911 when they need it the most. I was also pleased to see that we are asking how the proposals should apply to IP networks and facilities, such as data centers that host NG 911 services. I would like to also especially thank David, Lisa Folks, Jeff Goldthorpe, Lauren Kravitz, and those represented, including Eric Smith and John Healy, and the other talented staff members, of course, in the Public Safety Bureau for their work on this fine item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Thank you. Last night, I had the privilege of joining several hundred public safety officials, some of whom are here today, to celebrate our nation's emergency calling system at the 911 Honors Gala. This is a great event every year, but this is also a special year for 911 history buffs. After all, it was 45 years ago when the first 911 call was made in Haleyville, Alabama. And it was 10 years ago when the Congressional Next Generation 911 Caucus was first established to create a bipartisan voice to support our nation's 911 systems. Today, this caucus is a force for good, and it's led by Senator Amy Klobuchar, Senator Richard Burr, Representative Anna Eshoo, and Representative John Shimkus. It was also 10 years ago when the NG 911 Institute was established, a nonprofit organization that helps deploy and advance next-generation 911 services across the country. But history aside, last evening was an opportunity to celebrate the everyday heroes who run our 911 call centers, answer their phones with steely calm, and help ensure that help is on the way. Because that is what this is really all about. You may only make one 911 call in your life, but as the old saw goes, it will be the most important call you ever make. You need to know that your call will be answered. Yet last year, when the derecho storm struck the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, too many 911 calls were not answered. As we heard earlier, 77 public safety answering points spanning 6 states lost some connectivity. This affected more than 3.6 million people. 17 911 call centers lost service completely, leaving over 2 million people without access to 911. Just after the derecho, I visited the 911 center in Fairfax County, one of the public safety answering points that was unable to answer calls. The head of Fairfax County's Department of Public Safety Communications described an eerie quiet in the aftermath of the storm as the calls into 911 quickly and implausibly ceased. Something was not right. Something was broken. Which brings us to the Commission's efforts today to fix these problems. As a result of our investigation into communications failures during the derecho, we now have more clarity about what happened. We know that backup generators and switches failed. We know that power failures undermined monitoring capabilities. We also know that 911 centers were left in the dark without service and without notice. So the proposals before us build now on what we know. The need for better backup power at central offices, the need for improved 911 circuit auditing, the need for more diverse monitoring systems, and the need for more extensive reporting to 911 personnel on the front lines answering calls. They are common sense solutions. They should put us on the road toward making sure that failures like the ones we saw during the derecho never happen again. For my part, I want these policies put in place by the first anniversary of this storm. I also recognize that as we move forward in this proceeding, there will be discussion about the need to take each step proposed. There will be concerns about cost. These are fair. Debate is necessary and a healthy part of our process. But there should be no debate why this conversation matters, because this is not just a conversation about technical fixes. We must never forget this is a conversation about real people and their safety. Last night, I heard chilling stories from 911 operators at work in places like Aurora, Colorado, and Newtown, Connecticut, just down the road from where I grew up. Last night, and even now, the mention of these places conjures up difficult images. Their memories rightfully sting, and their horror leaves us justifiably unsettled. But in our haze of grief and outrage, we should never forget who was there to help. The calls that came tumbling into our 911 centers after these and other incidents unleashed the best that our public safety systems have to offer. They sent help, they offered hope, and they saved lives. Our rulemaking today is a small way of honoring those efforts and a big part of making sure our nation's 911 systems are dependable. It is also an essential part of making sure that the frailties we saw in the derecho last year are fixed and that every call to 911 is answered. So I support this rulemaking, and I thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for your work to deliver it to us today.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When Americans dial 911, they understand that they're not going to reach Halle Berry. But they do expect to reach one of the real-life heroes who staff our nation's public safety answering points, or PSAPs. It doesn't matter if the call is placed because of a natural disaster or a personal emergency. Whether on a landline or a cell phone, whether they are using a voice-over internet protocol or a circuit switch loop, our citizens expect to reach an emergency operator each and every time. And that's exactly what today's notice of proposed rulemaking is all about. Keeping the promise to consumers that when they call 911, emergency personnel will answer. That promise has long been a core mission of the FCC. Indeed, in the very first sentence of my very first statement at an FCC meeting, I pointed out that the very first section of the Communications Act of 1934 established the Commission in part for, quote, the purpose of promoting safety of life and property through the use of wire and radio communications. Staying true to that established statutory purpose in a time of technological change such as this is a challenge that we have to meet. Fortunately, everyone agrees that improving the resilience of communications networks, and especially the networks that serve PSAPs, should be one of our major goals moving forward. That's one of the things that we have learned at the two field hearings we have held so far on this subject. And even more fortunately, we're not writing on a blank slate. The Distinguished Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau compiled an extensive report on what went wrong after the derecho that swept across several states last June. The FCC's Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council has developed best practices. The Network Reliability Steering Committee of the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions has provided technical and operational expert guidance when needed. And the National Emergency Number Association, the National Association of State 911 Administrators, and the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials have developed and disseminated information about best practices to first responders all across this country. That's why I'm so glad that my colleagues accepted my suggestion to seek input from another group of stakeholders that's been working on matters of reliability and resiliency for years. The states, state commissions, and PSAPs. These entities handle many of the regulatory nuts and bolts of our emergency communications system. They establish 911 service tariffs. They collect and distribute 911 funds. And they negotiate 911 service contracts. Day in and day out, our state and local counterparts have been doing their part to keep their emergency calling centers operational to serve the American public. And I hope that they will share their expertise with us. Common sense isn't the only thing driving the need for consultation. So is the law. The new and emerging technologies 911 Improvement Act of 2008, for instance, is a good example. This act requires us to work cooperatively with public safety organizations, among others, to develop best practices that promote consistency where appropriate for 911 service. Among these best practices are network diversity requirements, call handling in the event of call overflow or network outages, and certification and testing requirements for service to PSAPs. I look forward to hearing from stakeholders how statutory responsibilities like these should shape our work going forward. In that same vein, I hope you will keep in mind an even more recent statute, the Next Generation 911 Advancement Act of 2012. Many of the best practices discussed in the notice, such as overflow rerouting, link failure rerouting, physical and logical network diversity, and continuous monitoring, are built into NG 911 networks. Indeed, the Bureau's derecho report noted that had NG 911 architectures and capabilities been in place, quote, they likely could have significantly lessened the derecho's impact on emergency communications. So facilitating that deployment should be a national priority. The notice rightly acknowledges as much, in part by seeking comment on whether any rules we adopt in this proceeding should contain a sunset provision. Such a provision would reflect the fact that rules adopted today may not be appropriate tomorrow, especially not after the widespread deployment and adoption of NG 911. I'm also glad that today's notice proposes to evaluate our options through the lens of cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis does not mean automatic support for or opposition to any proposed regulation. When properly applied, however, it does lead to smart regulation. Of course, the value of cost-benefit analysis is entirely dependent on the data that we use. And so I'm eager for all stakeholders to help us understand more thoroughly the actual costs of some of our proposals, especially where we don't have concrete evidence for the estimates used in the notice to calculate costs. In sum, I'm pleased to support today's notice. It's imperative that we take the necessary action in conjunction with the states in order to make sure that every American can reach an emergency operator when he or she dials 911. That promise has become part of our social contract, and it's a promise we have to keep. Thank you to Chief David Turetsky, Eric Schmidt, and distinguished keyboardist John Healy, among others in the Bureau, for their work on this effort, and I'm pleased to support it at today's meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Pai. Let me salute, to start, the many representatives of 911 call centers from around the country who are in our audience today. To you and those watching this being streamed on the internet and those who are out there working. We appreciate so much the work that you do every day to keep our nation safe. And our action today is intended to ensure that the communications technology you need is there when you need it, for you and for the millions of Americans you protect. Let me recognize Barbara Jager, the president of NENA, who's here. NENA has been a strong and tireless advocate on behalf of 911 professionals, and we appreciate NENA's engagement in our work, as well as all the other entities who have participated in our public safety and 911 proceedings. Last June, 911 call centers across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states got a wake-up call when the derecho storm struck, causing dangerous 911 outages to millions of Americans. In some instances, those outages lasted for days. 911 outages are absolutely unacceptable, especially when it comes to communicating with emergency personnel during disasters. Our policy has to be zero tolerance for outages. And so we immediately launched an investigation into the 911 outages coming out of the derecho. This is something we all agreed on. And 2 months ago, our Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau issued a strong and thorough report examining the failures of 911 communications after the derecho. A key takeaway from that report was that many of the problems encountered could have been avoided if best practices for improving reliability had been in place and followed. Best practices don't protect the public if they're not put in place. We must ensure that these best practices are put into practice. Today, the Commission takes an essential step to do so, to ensure Americans can rely on 911 networks in the event of major disasters, to ensure that when you call 911, you get an answer. Today's notice proposes that 911 service providers regularly audit 911 circuits for physical diversity, improving network reliability and resiliency by helping identify and correct single points of failure. It also proposes ensuring 911 providers maintain adequate central office backup power, supported by appropriate maintenance, testing, and records retention. And it promotes physically diverse network monitoring and control links, providing increased resiliency and accurate situational awareness during communications outages. These are detailed technical recommendations that come out of the thorough work that the Bureau did, but that's what's needed to make sure that we don't see these kinds of outages again. Implementation approaches range from reporting and certification requirements to mandatory reliability standards enforced through inspections and compliance reviews. Building the record is vital. Debate is essential. And then the Commission must quickly do what is necessary to prevent 911 outages from happening again. The Bureau's derecho report also found that multiple jurisdictions didn't receive adequate notice of 911 service disruptions during and after the storm. And so the notice proposes changes to the Commission's current outage reporting rules to clarify service providers' responsibility to notify 911 call centers of communications outages. Proposed language adds specificity to this notification requirement to ensure that 911 call centers get the notice they need when they need it, and have the ability to take action quickly to restore service. This Commission action will have greatest immediate effect on entities that currently route and deliver 911 calls to call centers, but the notice also recognizes, as you've heard, that the transition to more IP-based and wireless networks for 911 is happening and should happen, and seeks comment on the range of entities and actions likely to provide 911 services in the future over next-generation networks, and delivering the same outcome there, reliable and resilient communications with 911 call operators. In particular, the NPRM supports transitioning to NG911 while ensuring that 911 service providers are held to high standards of reliability both now and in the future. Today's action continues our work at the Commission to tackle these issues and other 911-related issues. For example, in the last 2 years, working together, we initiated text to 911 on mobile phones, launched outbound wireless emergency alerts to allow local authorities to send text to people during emergencies, and we're improving location accuracy for mobile 911 so emergency personnel can more quickly locate people in need. Thank you, David and Eric and John, for your excellent, thorough work on the report and this notice. There are many people in the Bureau who worked on it as well, and like so many things, this has been a cross-Bureau effort, and the outcome is an important one for our country. With that, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes have it, and the request for editorial privileges is now granted. David, Eric, and John, thank you very much. So now we're going to proceed to personnel announcements, and let's begin with my friend Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, originally I had scheduled this time to present a research study on the beneficial effects that March Madness has on broadband adoption in this country. But as I conducted my research, I realized that a really uncomfortably high number of people who subscribe to a broadband service for the first time for purposes of streaming the NCAA men's tournament were actually doing so in the hopes of watching Duke lose. So I took the wind out of my sails. I abandoned that effort, and but it's what Duke can do to help the cause, you know. So I thought I'd pivot and go in a different direction. After nearly 7 years of carrying out the incredibly high honor of serving the American people at the FCC, it is time to turn more of my energies towards an even higher calling, serving my family. After a great deal of deliberation, which has resulted in a tremendous amount of chatter, I have decided that I will step down as a commissioner of the Federal Communications Commission in a few weeks. Today's announcement is not a farewell. As you all know, I do not do well with those, so let's all avoid all that for now and tackle that challenge another day. I will also save most of my expressions of appreciation for a later date, but I would be remiss if I did not offer some of the bigger thank yous right away, such as to God, my parents, my beautiful bride Jennifer, our 3 amazing children, as well as our large family at large. I married into a very large Irish Catholic family. Friends, all of my colleagues on the commission, both past and present, and the talented and dedicated public servants throughout the FCC, especially all of the wonderful and tireless professionals who have worked on my team in my office. Please keep in mind that trying to make me look good day after day as we fought for freedom must have been quite a challenge for them. And there'll be more about that at a later date. But a very special thanks goes to those who have stayed to turn out the lights, the women behind the curtain. Tasha Kinney, Erin McGrath, Christine Kurth, and the Rock of Gibraltar for all of us, Bridget Kathleen Nealon Calamus. She's Irish, in case you didn't know. And by the way, could we get a camera close-up of her? Because I want to show this moment of blushing. I'm going to pay for just having mentioned her name anyway, so what the heck? I might as well get it upside. There we go. Forever captured on our YouTube FCC channel. Erin is also Irish, but doesn't blush to the same degree, and she's named for Ireland. But anyway, maybe you all are. Maybe Christine and Tasha is too. I don't know. I would also like to thank the individuals who literally handed me this job, not once, but twice. First and foremost, Senator Ted Stevens, the late senator from Alaska, and President George W. Bush for the first time around. Senator Mitch McConnell and President Barack Obama for making the mistake the second time around, as well as many, many members of Congress. Thank you for placing such enormous trust in me. And again, this is not a time for farewells. I'm just announcing my plans to step down sometime soon. So members of the gallery may be wondering, what am I going to do next? The press gallery. Well, I will be talking to the FCC's Chief Ethics Officer, Patrick J. Carney. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Pat. To make sure that my departure is in full compliance with not only the letter, but the spirit of all of our ethics rules. And beyond that, I have absolutely no plans other to take my family on a much-needed vacation starting this weekend, so I will not be returning any emails or voicemails. Thank you. So, more seriously, though, until the farewells, as always, may God bless each of you and our great nation. Thank you.
Well, Rob has asked that we keep any remarks short. Actually, he asked that we not say anything, but we're not going to do that. It is hard to keep. We'll have to see what the tally is. I'll have more to say at a later point, including some fun stories that deserve to be told, but not today. For now, let me just say this: Rob McDowell has been an extraordinary colleague, deeply knowledgeable about the vital and growing communications and technology sector, creative, wise, and a great partner on the commission. Rob has been essential to so many FCC achievements in the years he has served on the commission, like the landmark reform of universal service and intercarrier compensation, which simply would not have happened without Rob McDowell. Rob's thoughtful engagement in commission policy has always improved the quality of our work. I have worked with Rob from the very first day of my tenure. We have had countless meetings, countless conversations, countless issues to work through, and I can tell you that I have thoroughly enjoyed working together with Rob. I'm proud that Rob is both a colleague and a friend. And I have no doubt that he'll build on his tremendous experience and continue his long record of success. There will be a farewell event. It will be called the Embarrassing Farewell Event for Rob in the coming weeks, where we'll have a chance to make him blush and to properly celebrate Rob's extraordinarily distinguished public service. For now, let me ask all of you to join me in honoring Rob's great work here at the FCC. And let me ask my colleagues if any of them would like to violate Rob's request, as I have done. Commissioner Clyburn?
Yes, and thank you. Just before I do that, I failed to mention that one of the individuals from the responder communities from my state, from Myrtle Beach, where I just left. So, welcome to the commission. I apologize that I forgot my Southern graces about mentioning that I have a fellow South Carolinian in the room. So, again, thank you, and for all that you do, we really, really appreciate it. Rob, I didn't get a chance to talk to Rob because I was on travel, but I listened to his message, and he was quite clear with his directive, saying this is not a farewell, do not say anything. The chairman's going to say 4 or 5 lines. I think the chairman said more like 10, but anyway. So I will follow suit just a bit and not listen to Rob because that's what I do best. But Rob, you're a loyal, committed, intelligent, a true example of a gentleman. You listen to me even though, and when I don't deserve it, you've only fallen asleep, I think, 3 times during that, that I can remember, but you've always been there, and when I needed that pick-me-up, DC is different. You always said, give yourself a break. You know more than you give yourself credit. So again, I won't continue to violate the rule, but I just will say to you that when it comes, I'll come to terms with it, but I will still miss you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner ROSENWORCEL.
So in this job, I have worked with Rob McDowell for less than a year, but I have counted him as a friend for much longer than that. He is smart, insightful, and deeply knowledgeable about all things communications. Now, we may not always have the same perspective on every issue, but we were always able to work together, and I think our policies are better for it. But I didn't understand until recently how great a teacher Rob can be. For instance, I thought I understood spectral interference before I arrived at the commission. But Rob has now explained to me that non-interference is, in fact, the prime directive. And for the uninitiated, Rob is going to explain that Star Trek reference later. But in all seriousness, he has been a terrific colleague. We'll certainly have longer words later, but for now I want to thank you for your service, your endless good humor, and your friendship.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say, with today's announcement, a chill has descended upon the dais, and I think Commissioner Clyburn would agree with me. I mean that literally. It is freezing up here. We've got to turn down the air conditioning. But nonetheless, I have to say, and I haven't had a chance to say it publicly, but with today's announcements, I feel like the floodgates can open, that Rob and I have had some pretty serious differences over our several months here in office. For example, I support the wholesome All-American basketball team at the University of Kansas. Rob has chosen to cast his lot with, literally given the mascot, I suppose, the great Satan of Duke. Rob chooses to live way out in the wild hinterlands of Vienna. I choose to keep it real in the intense urban core of Arlington, Virginia. Most notably, he is actually funny, and I'm just not. But beyond those serious differences, I have to say that Rob has been a terrific colleague. In fact, even before I got here, during what the Irish might call the Troubles, he gave me a number of hopeful calls saying, hang in there. Things will look up, and sure enough, they did. And once I got here to the commission, he has proven to be just a consistently wonderful colleague, knowledgeable about the issues, proactive when the needs of the time demanded it. I think he was one of the first to sound the alarm on international threats to internet freedom, and he's continued to carry that banner forward. And he's just the model public servant, I think, in so many ways. And so he is certainly going to be missed by me and by my colleagues, and I don't know what we're going to do without him, but I'm hopeful that the chairman and my colleagues will agree that I guess I should have 2 votes after the Well, we can discuss this all later. So, but anyway, Commissioner McDowell, I have much more to say in the future. I have a tome the size of Ulysses, another great Irish writer. I'll be happy to read aloud then, but for now, Godspeed, and we will miss you very much.
Thank you, and thank you also. We'll announce the date of a farewell gathering, and before we end the meeting, a couple of hellos and a goodbye. First, hello to Quinn Smith. Where is Quinn? Quinn is sleeping. Quinn is sleeping. Quinn is known to many of you of Cherise Smith's youngest daughter, and we're so pleased that Quinn is here today. Quinn is very precocious. Her first words were NPRM. And she is now our youngest intern. But, of course, Quinn is here because she wanted to be here and remember for the rest of her life the announcement of Cherise's departure from the commission. Cherise Smith, of course, is my chief counsel. Cherise has been with me from day one, and Cherise is now leaving the FCC, and we will miss her very, very much. Cherise's list of accomplishments over the past 4 years has been remarkable, and Cherise, I'm going to embarrass you by listing some of them because none of these things would have happened without your round-the-clock, intense, diligent, excellent work. Cherise brokered the agreement with mobile providers to help end bill shock, those text alerts that you get on your mobile device now warning you about going over the limits. Thank you, Cherise. Cherise led the revamp of the video relay service, preserving a vital communications link for deaf and hard of hearing people and saving the taxpayers $275 million. Pretty much what you deserve for the work that you've done here. Cherise spearheaded the effort to move broadcasters' public files and political files online, increasing transparency for citizens, journalists, and the American people. Cherise helped close the terrestrial loophole. There were those who thought for a decade that you could not close this loophole. Cherise closed the loophole, promoting greater competition in the pay TV market. And, of course, Cherise did this all while raising and giving birth to Quinn and Morgan. And I think we've all seen in the chairman's office and at the commission not only brilliance and commitment, but incredible character every day. Cherise is one of the most well-liked people at a commission filled with well-liked people. Cherise, everyone is going to miss you. We know you're going to do incredibly well in your future endeavors, and we know that we'll be staying in touch not only with me, but with everyone here at the Commission. Thank you so much for your excellent service. I'm delighted to announce that Elizabeth Andrion will be replacing Charisse as Chief Counsel and Senior Legal Advisor in OCH, removing the acting tag, which she has now. Elizabeth stepped up over her own objections, but jumped in when Charisse went on maternity leave and has done such an incredible job picking up, as you've heard, a very heavy load. Elizabeth has been at the Commission for some time, has had a number of important roles at the Commission, including leading our Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis, OSP, managing the Future of Media project with Steve Waldman, which produced the seminal Information Needs of Communities report. She was a top advisor to then Chairman Kevin Martin, so she's no newcomer to the Office of the Chairman, and we've really benefited from her work at the Commission and also her prior work in the private sector, in the TV business, and also as CEO of a media company, which she launched for the Los Angeles affiliate of prominent Silicon Valley venture capitalist firm Draper Fisher Jurvetson. Elizabeth has taught at Georgetown, UCLA, and American, received her law degree from UC Berkeley, her master's from USC's Annenberg. With such strong Berkeley roots, I understand that the meeting of legal advisors will now be held in drum circles. That was Elizabeth. Yes. We used to do that, and then we stopped. I don't know why. Elizabeth, thank you very much, and welcome again to our office. Are there any other personnel announcements? If not...
Can we say something about Charisse?
Oh, yes, please. Rob.
Yeah, so with all that, first of all, just to paraphrase Monty Python, I'm not dead yet. And neither is Charisse. Happy St. Patrick's Day to Quinn with a name like that. I mean, for crying out loud. The one thing I was quick to learn about Charisse is, well, first of all, that she reminds me of Angela Giancarlo in that she does not mince her words. There's never any doubt of where Charisse stands. She was always forthcoming about what she thinks or wants. But above all, Charisse has been fair and insightful and a terrific representative of the chairman's office. And the entire commission and the American people have benefited greatly from her thoughtfulness, her energy, and her leadership. Even on those occasions when our offices were on the opposite sides of an issue, like that terrestrial loophole, I think, actually, was one of them. I had a steak dinner, which I lost. It was all legal there, Sean. And happy St. Patrick's Day to you, too, Sean. The OLEV plan. Is right, but I haven't paid the bet yet. But I was going to go double or nothing on net neutrality, actually. But
Done.
Okay. But Charisse always worked constructively and collegially with me and my entire team, and we were often, more often than folks realize, able to come to mutually agreeable compromises. And when we couldn't agree, we would just agree to disagree and be very professional about it and go on to the next matter. I will miss your sense of humor and the fact that you always charitably laugh at my jokes. Thank you. And it was a pleasure working with you on the Calm Act, where we changed OxyClean and ShamWow ads forever, and other such things. But more seriously, thank you for your years of government service, and I wish you all the best as you embark on the next chapter of your life. And to Elizabeth, it's always been an honor and a privilege to work with you, and I know you're going to do an outstanding job. We've worked together over the years, over my almost 7 years here, in a lot of things. So big shoes to fill, but I know you'll do it well, and good luck. Wish I could say I look forward to working with you in your new role, but knock 'em dead. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Gleiber.
Yes. My other South Carolinian left the room, but only I've got a proud South Carolinian with me. I can remember first meeting Charisse. It was in the Georgetown Law Library. I don't know what I was doing there, but I was there. And Charisse, came up. She mentioned to me still with a smile on her face, still very supportive, that my sister actually helped pledge her. And usually those aren't necessarily the fondest of memories, but if she had any problems with anybody named Clyburn, she didn't show it that day. So I want to thank her for that. But immediately I knew something was up that day. Y'all didn't make certain announcements until weeks later, but I knew something was going on. It's that South Carolina intuition. But Cherise, as you've heard, is a fierce advocate for what she believes in and for her principle. Intelligent, focused, just has her priorities straight. She has little Quinn down there. The only America can't see Quinn right now, but she is a beautiful bundle of joy. Don't wake her up because she might start crying, and I can't take it. I'm sorry. Oh, with all due respect. But I, again, have enjoyed working with you all these many years. You have been a constant support to me, especially when I needed it most. So thank you so very much. All the best to you, and please, let's have that cup of coffee.
Thanks. Please.
When I first arrived at the commission last year, one of the first calls I received was from Cherise. She just took it upon herself to let me know that I should be welcome back to this building and that I had a friend in these halls. And I think that shows Cherise at her core, supportive, decent, and kind. But you actually don't know her until you see her in action. And you see her ability to combine a keen understanding of substance with a relentless drive to build consensus and construct fair outcomes. So everyone who has worked here with Cherise knows that she runs a tight ship. And as evidenced by the long list of accomplishments the chairman just read, she gets things done. She's been a terrific public servant. She's been a great friend. And I think the FCC is definitely a better place for her having worked here.
Thank you. Commissioner Pye?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to associate myself with all the comments of my colleagues and note that it's pretty rare to have an FCC staffer who's accomplished a lot of things. It's also rare to find an FCC staffer who is well-liked throughout the building. And the fact that Cherise has accomplished both of those tasks is a testament to her character, her integrity, her intelligence, and her persistence. I'd say intermittently I was looking throughout the meeting at your beautiful daughter. Just congratulations on that. That puts everything in perspective. It's obviously the most important thing you'll ever do. I'm sure every parent feels the same way. But we are grateful that during your waking hours during the day, you've chosen to spend some of your time here at the FCC. The agency and the American public are a lot better for your efforts, and so we thank you for that.
Thank you all. And again, Cherise, thank you. And with that, Madam Secretary, would you announce the date of the next commission meeting?
Okay, the next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, April 18th, 2013.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.
There's a reason for everything in Washington.
We're going to be random
that was really nice.
new theories. By the way, I have a book recommendation today. This is
book recommendation?
I'm reading. There's a book called Why Does E equals MC Squared? And it's actually a fantastic book. Brooks, I think you'll... It's called Why Does E equals MC Squared? And it's this wonderful explanation of...
Relativity?
Yeah. When you think about it, it's such an interesting thing, right? Why the idea that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. How does that all make sense? Anyway, it's a wonderful book. I recommend it.
And when
There's
you
my
finish
lead.
that, read E equals MC squared, a biography of the world's most famous equation.
All right.
It's when my son in high school had to read a biography. That's the one he read. I would recommend it. It's really cool because it goes into. We'll talk about that later.
There's a Tesla book that I would recommend that I've read.
Well,
Excellent.
The Tesla book is the man is more interesting than the biography. Let me put it that way. But it's definitely worth reading about Tesla's life. He was an incredible person.
We could go on.
Later.
There is, by the way, there's another book that called The Big Switch by Carr. which is it's about a different part of the space. It's about the the origins of the rollout of electric grids in the United States and what it teaches us about the rollout of communications grids and networks. It's a fantastic book. Okay, who are we starting with? Danny?
How you doing? Chairman, it's a day about exits. Are you far behind Commissioner McDowell?
Today is Rob's day. He really has had an extraordinary impact on the commission. As I said before, landmark reforms like Universal Service Fund wouldn't have happened without him. As for me, the question's been asked and answered. I don't have anything to add today.
Well, what is the answer?
Oh, the answer is no news to report, and I have nothing to announce.
Hi, how are you doing? Yesterday, or actually a couple of days ago, we heard from the NAB folks asking for another round of comments on incentive auctions. I'm sticking to a line of questioning that has nothing to do with exits. What is your comment on that? How do you feel about possibly putting incentive auction rulemaking up for another round?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that everything that's happened since Congress passed the incentive auction legislation has made me more optimistic about the opportunities of this new idea as we move forward. And keep in mind when you think about this issue, in 2009 when we first talked about spectrum crunch, people said there's no spectrum crunch. And when we talked about how we need to adopt a new generation of policies to free up more spectrum, people said no, you don't. And when we developed the incentive auction idea, people said, well, Congress will never pass that. And so, there'll continue to be very healthy debate about it. The commission will keep moving forward. It's a big, exciting idea to free up very valuable, desirable spectrum for mobile broadband. The need for that spectrum only goes up. And I think you've heard from each of the commissioners at the Senate hearing last week and before, there is a broad bipartisan commitment to the idea of getting this done and getting it done on a schedule that maximizes the opportunity. So as quick as we can, that maximizes the opportunity of the incentive auction idea.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields with Bloomberg News. Could you give me your thoughts, please, on delinking telephone numbers and area codes, which is a suggestion I believe you've circulated. And do you yourself cling to a 202 or a 212 number?
I do have a 202 number. Listen, as you know, for several years now, we've been looking at all of our different policies that come out of the traditional way that communications has been organized and looked at how do we modify that for a digital world, an IP world, a new world. And we have, I don't remember, we've circulated this but haven't released it. I'm trying to remember So the proposal we've circulated to the other commissioners would put us on a path to delink numbers from geography, but it's not about the delinking as much as it's about ensuring that any entity that's providing a communication service can have access to numbers. I don't remember how much we've said publicly about it because I take it we've circulated this proposal to the other commissioners, so it's something that we're deliberating on at the commission. So I probably shouldn't say that much, but philosophically, that's the direction we're going.
You have a 202. Do you live in the district?
I do live in the district.
Okay.
I know that the general rule of thumb, the general thought is that it's easier to confirm a Democratic and a Republican commissioner. So my question is, does that make any sense to you? And at some point, do you begin to feel like Cousin Eddie?
Well, I'm not sure the reference. And Brooks, I really
You're
think
not a National Lampoon fan.
It's not so much a question for me. It's a question for people in the Senate and people who follow that kind of work.
Hi, Chairman. Is the commission close to rendering a decision on Sprint SoftBank Clearwire?
I would say that the review of that transaction is proceeding on a schedule consistent with the 180-day shot clock, which I think is at this point an end of May date, if I have, but that should be double checked. But the process is moving on a track consistent with the shot clock.
Okay. And have you read Big Roads?
If I've read
have
Big
you read
Roads?
the book Big Roads?
No, but that's been recommended to me, so I'm going to add that to the list.
When you leave, you'll have more stuff to read.
You know what? I'll tell you, reading in this job has been it's been a great thing. I like to read.
There was criticism why the FCC dealt with the Metro T-Mobile deal at the bureau level, not the commission level. Do you have any, reaction to that criticism about why you had the bureau deal with it and not the commissioners?
Sure, I'll just explain. The decision to have that done at the bureau level was completely consistent with commission precedent on how it deals with certain kinds of decision making. As you know, we do a lot at the bureau level. In the case of that transaction, there were no petitions to deny, not a single one. There were no conditions that were advocated by any member of the commission, and there were no issues of commission policy that were implicated by the decision. So those are, whenever that happens, we make decisions at the bureau level consistent with our process. Commissioners are given notice in advance, and so it was transparent to everyone at the commission. And look, the other point I'd make about that is, as we said, as the bureau said in its order on that, that transaction is one of a number of steps that have a number of developments over the last year that are strengthening competitors and competition in the mobile market. So it was an important transaction. As you know, 2 years ago, the mobile market in the U.S. was on, I've said this before, but on the doorstep of duopoly. The blocking of the AT&T T-Mobile transaction, the spectrum and capital investment that went to T-Mobile, the divestiture of spectrum in connection with the Verizon Wireless Spectrum Co. transaction. We're seeing strengthening competitors in the space, a positive trajectory in competition in the space, and that's a good thing for our innovation economy and for consumers.
Thank you.
With that, I'll say that it's Sharice's day today. And all right, see y'all.
Thank you.
Cousin Eddie was the guy who showed up with the RV at Christmas vacation.
You mean with the white shoes, Brooke? Brooke, did he have white shoes on? Yeah. Well, that was his first. And the dog's not.